Hi, everybody. I'm David Knapp, Director of Digital Marketing for American Express. I'm thrilled to be here with you today. And I want to talk to you about an always-on service-like experience that we created for our customers. We did this in partnership with Ergo Interactive, John Hendricks, and they worked very closely with the Movable developer kit and the tech team at Movable. So when I started at American Express in 2015, I inherited a high-performing monthly e-newsletter program which developed a tremendous amount of value for our business, and it used a lot of segmentation and personalization. But when I started in the role, my husband said to me, there's nothing I'd rather open less than an email from my credit card company. So I knew I had my work cut out for me. And this is what the program looked like when I took over. We did a tremendous amount of segmentation. We segmented based on tenure, so we would serve content to customers in the early tenure stage, try to get them to activate their spend on the card, and really put them on the trajectory of a best customer. And then we'd also have custom content for our longer tenured customers who we know are getting competitive offers all the time and may or may not really understand the value of the product that they're on. In addition, we would segment based on card products. So we have a huge suite of products. The Charge product portfolio has Platinum, Gold, Green, Plum. We would have the lending portfolio, which is Simply Cash Plus and Blue Business Plus. And we also have our co-brand portfolio, so Delta, Starwood, Hilton, and Lowe's. And in addition to that segmentation, we had a lot of personalization. So we would personalize in 5 different areas. Number 1, we would personalize based on name, so I'm sure everyone is doing that. And name is really, table stakes. What we actually found is that business name is more important than the customer's name, because when you're marketing to small business owners, they might delegate the task of opening emails to a gatekeeper, like an admin or a controller. We would also personalize based on their member sin state, which is an important way for us to recognize loyalty for our customers. That's showing up on the card product, and it's also an easy way for us to demonstrate that relationship in our email. We'd personalize based on the account last 5 digits, and we would also personalize based on the last statement balance for membership rewards. In our industry, rewards are really important, and showing that rewards content would signal to the customer that this information, the email in this e-newsletter, would be personalized to them and have really interesting, relevant information. But as I mentioned, the financial services industry is hugely competitive, with new entrants coming in all the time. And I wanted to create an email program that was very innovative. My mandate was to drive a tremendous amount of change and growth. I wanted to deliver 10x growth in our communications. And I knew I needed to do something that was completely and fundamentally different than what everyone else was doing. So I wanted to move way beyond the standard segmentation and personalization and move into what we're calling individualization. Personalization, anyone can do it. It's really, a batch list pull. It's not that special. It's not that interesting. It doesn't mean that the content is truly relevant to the customer. And I wanted to really move past that one-note, one-dimension personalization and make sure that we were delivering tangible value to our customers, something they couldn't see anywhere else, bringing the full, powerful backing of the American Express brand and all the proprietary data that we have, and really creating what we call data as content and custom experiences that are unique to each individual. So now, in order to bring this vision to life and deliver that explosive growth in our channel, I needed to bring on a partner who could seamlessly integrate data, content, and technology. And so I brought in Ergo Interactive, and they're a shop that focuses primarily in the email channel and invests heavily in data and content. And I'm pleased to introduce you now to John Hendricks, who's the CEO of Ergo.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Okay. At this point, it's been decades, and we've all been talking about one-to-one marketing, and conceptually very sound. The failure to bring it to life has not been a failure of imagination, but really a failure of execution. The root of that is the data. Up until recently, even in the past few years, the cost of storing data, the cost of processing data has been prohibitively expensive. And I would imagine that everybody in this room can relate to the notion of, and the frustration of not being able to access their own data, either because it's siloed, it's in different data formats, the different database languages, data hygiene comes into play, and we just have not been able to really operationalize that. That finally is starting to change for a variety of reasons. Probably among the top is that customers, quite frankly, are demanding it now. The key thing is that if you have the right tools and the right partners, you can really do that. You'll know that you're starting to be on the right track when your language changes from segments to user profiles. And when you start to think of your customer base as individuals, a big epiphany happens and you start to really change the whole paradigm. What comes with that paradigm really is a new way of thinking about your content. So we said right message to the right person at the right time. It requires a shift from offer, long form content, blog post, into what really is an adaptive journey. The way that for me crystallizes what that feels like is, imagine reading your favorite magazine, and every page you turn, this thing just feels like it's getting to know you. It's turning into your best friend. It's understanding what you like as much as what you don't like, to the point that it's starting to put predictive content in front of you. You'll know when you're on the right track when, again, you start to think of, if you're using language like snackable content, modular content, you're tagging and you're scoring your content so that you can put it together into conversations. And if you're going to take millions of customers and hundreds of content modules and really try and develop a conversation, you need some sort of a coherent framework to think about it. A great framework to use when you're thinking about it is the, to borrow from clinical psychology and behavior change, because what you're doing is you're moving people through a decision process. So my weak spot is M&Ms, and you can put those under my nose and no questions asked, I will inhale a bag of them, no problem. If I am getting ready to buy a car, if I'm booking a vacation, if I am applying for a credit card and want to then have all my employees using that card, takes more work. So then the question is, okay, well, how do you do this? So you get a lot of customers, or a lot of prospects and customers, and a lot of content. So the answer is you do that with an enormous amount of coffee. No, you can't do it manually, with or without the caffeine. What it takes is a lot of algorithmic work, so really structuring the content and structuring the rules and the logic to make this happen in an automated way. At this point in the game, when we were working with David, we said, okay, well, we've tackled a lot of these things. We've tackled the key challenges of data. We've tackled the key parts of content. We have, for sure, individualized experiences and a way to bring it to life, as well as starting to dip our toe into the adaptive aspect. What we didn't have was the real-time nature of that. And when we sat down, it really became one of the most fundamental parts of success or failure with the journey. Allison and I have known each other for a very long time, so our company and Movable Inc. have very deep roots. And David, who I don't know if you've had the opportunity to meet, but is one of the smartest people I've ever worked with. He comes in with his famous question of what would it take? So we sat down, the three groups, and said, okay, what really would it take to bring this, what proven to be game-changing, framework to life? And what we did with our collaboration, we had our technology people working with Movable Inc.'s, being in each other's offices, and we ended up having our technology integrate and work closely with their technology so that we ended up with the ability to have, we had individualized, we had adaptive, but most importantly, we had real-time. And real-time to the point that we weren't just selecting content, we were actually driving data into the content. I talked a little bit about the idea of a company, small business, having employee cards, and that's important for American Express as part of their business model, but it's also important most important for small business owners. We went out and said, we're not just going to have the right message at the right time. We're going to really drive conversations using the behavioral changes. So we developed, this is an example of the content, and I'm going to give you a few examples. These are real world examples. These are real people, but fictitious names of the business owners and their companies. So the first person we had is Nate, owned a fitness company where he had sort of an army of trainers. His first year of card membership, he interacted with the employee card content in the email and other channels a few times, but doesn't have any employee cards yet. So we put that piece of content in front of him. The next month, his business spend is increasing, and he's interacting with this e-newsletter program that we call By the Numbers. It's a monthly communication. So we put this piece of content in front of him. The third month, he's continuing to engage. Not a lot of noticeable increase, but other factors that we're listening for are indicating that he's still somebody that we want to put this message in front of. So we put all three pieces of content in front of him, he converts. What starts to happen as we move from running to sprinting, I would say, is you are moving from calendar-based content into algorithmically presented content. So it becomes the penultimate lights out program where you're always ahead planning content, but how and when it gets deployed really changes. The way we work into that is we're literally triggering content into our sort of regularly scheduled show or piece of content. If something happens, if a business condition happens, we're not sending out a brand new email, we're just replacing a piece of content that is lower in priority, and we literally overwrite that with logic. To bring this to life, in parallel to what, all these sort of thinking behind it and the technology behind it, we also brought people into our usability labs to say, should the form factor change? And I'm sure we can all relate to when we get a piece of email that has been converted, that's actually, rather than mobile first, it's responsive, and it looks like a very long piece of toilet paper, and people just scroll. It's bad enough when you're doing it yourself, but it's actually quite funny when you're seeing people do it and you're doing retina tracking, and you sort of can see the exasperation. So what we were able to do in parallel was to do it as a mobile-first endeavor so that we could leverage a lot of the native functionality as much as possible in mobile devices. So one of the things that you can do is you start to bring in carouseling, and we brought that in. So we would have different areas of the content, and then we would allow people, if they found an area that they liked, they could sort of scroll horizontally over into that area. So the different pieces are, so benefits tracking, so that's selection of content as well as updates. So this is if I'm a Platinum card member, I get a $200 airline credit. You're giving me tangible information, how much I've used, how much I have left, and it's a strong reminder. Account activity, this is one of the carousel pieces that I was talking about. The real-time rewards, this will probably never go away as an important piece of information for small business owners. David mentioned this earlier. Digital insights. So we got to a point where we were bringing more insights to people's inboxes than what they were actually getting when they logged into their account management. And the beauty of this is that as much as email is the channel that everybody loves to sort of complain about, it scales. It is, people may or may not come to your website. They may or may not read your the statement that if you mail it to them, they may or may not call. But we're pushing it out and assuming that we are sending the right content and we're engaging them. We know that most of these people, most of the time, are going to be interacting with what we put in front of them. Spend-based content. So if you know that I'm taking a trip, in this case, so we will put a very specific travel guide for a very specific location, and then finally individual recognition. So in this case, anniversary points and recognition.
Notice the design is also a lot better, right, than that earlier one, which is funny because when I took on this role, I was told that we had tested images and we didn't need them because the test showed that customers don't care about the visuals. And I realized that scientific test and learn is super important. And when you do a test, like an image, no image, you have to make sure that the image is relevant and adds to the story, because otherwise you could get sort of a false conclusion from your testing. And we realized that when we added imagery that brought things, I thought, how can it be that images are irrelevant when people are addicted to Instagram and Facebook? So with this program that we created, we really get a lot of feedback from our customers. And every month when we deploy, we get a lot of people clicking on the little link at the bottom to tell us about your experience with this communication. And one of the quotes that we pulled out, which was really exciting to hear, is talking about that data as content that John mentioned, which I like to say the email is like a mirror, and it reflects the relationship the customer has back to them, and that's why they're so addicted to that content. When we make it all about the customer and individualize that experience, it becomes a lot more exciting and vivid for them. And so here's a quote. You pointed out that the charge for a newspaper subscription had more than doubled from the previous rate. You really do have my back. So that's, again, reflecting the powerful backing brand promise that we have in our current campaign. And when the customers are able to re-articulate that back to us, it demonstrates that the communication that we're driving is really adding a lot of value to their experience and helping them run their business by the numbers, which is the title of the program. So with that, I'm happy to take, and John and I are happy to take any questions about this program. I don't know if there's a mic. Oh, here, there's a mic coming. We always at work say, like, don't talk until the mic comes because there are people on the phone and they cannot hear you. So I don't know if we have a WebEx, but wait until the mic comes to you. Thank you.
I've got a question about so the content of the emails that was redone, and actually talking about like transactions and the amount that was spent. Did you have trouble getting approval through legal and compliance to actually send this information by email?
No, because the email is a unique identifier. It's a deterministic characteristic. And so we were confident that we were delivering communication directly to the customer and making sure that the data is not stored by Movable Ink at all. It's a screenshot that is created at the moment of email open. So there's no record or transmission of that data.
And the other aspect of it is device possession. You're not just sending it out into the open. There's the holding your mobile phone, logging into the account, logging into your email account, and your computer when you come in.
Hi, for the two questions. The first with the carousel, is that specifically for iOS? And the second one, as far as the type of information you're serving up, how much data do you want to share? Like, there's certain stats that are more relevant to the customer than others?
Yeah, so our customers like free stuff and bonus points. So anytime we can talk to them about free stuff or bonus points, they're super engaged. Some of the highest performing content, like if you have everyone should have a Platinum American Express card, in my opinion. And because it has a ton of benefits, there's over 40 benefits. And one of the benefits is lounge access at the airports. And so we can actually serve, and I think John might have shown a content module where if we know you've booked a flight to Miami, we can say, on your upcoming trip to Miami, don't forget to visit the lounge. And then there's 12 paragraphs of disclosure. But any kind of content about their real-time airline fee credit, remaining balance, anything about the lounge access, free stuff, bonus points. The rewards were one of the first APIs that we integrated maybe a year and a half ago. We were, as I mentioned at the beginning, we were doing statement points, MR points based on your last statement. And when I started in the role, I was told, hey, just work with Movable Ink and you can make it real time. And then, a few phone calls later, we were able to get that embed code in there. Marissa, who now works for me, was the account manager at Movable Ink, who helped me learn what an embed code was and how to stick it in the HTML. And so you too can learn how to do digital marketing. It just takes asking a lot of questions. But anyway, we integrated the real-time rewards points, and then we have, as I mentioned, a huge portfolio of products. So there's like 7 different currencies of rewards that we were able to bring in real time. So Delta Miles, Lowe's points, Star points, all those other currencies, and the customers, that's probably the top performing content in the channel that people engage with.
I thought I'd ask a question, so they'd have to come all the way back to this
Perfect.
side of the room.
Right on strategy. So over here, you start thinking about questions next.
So I thought it was really interesting earlier how you were talking about the obstacles of getting your members, consumers to open your emails because they are getting an email from their credit card company. And you had a great presentation about how you're using data and algorithms to help optimize the content shown to the consumer. But I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you're tackling the obstacle of just getting them to open to see all that great content.
Yeah, I mean, we've tested a ton of subject lines, and the current line that we have is your business by the numbers. So we have that business name personalization, then by the numbers. And we've been on a huge journey with our subject lines. At one point, we were using algorithms to produce the subject lines. And what we realized is that if you get customers to open, but then they're not engaging with the content because the subject line is sort of misleading or off-brand, that's not really a useful metric. So I think of some of those email metrics are kind of like outdated, or they're kind of like talking about impressions on a display ad. It's like, what is the actual conversion? And so that was one of the things that I did when I started. So I was joking earlier about learning digital marketing from Movable Ink and Ergo. And the reason is I have a strategy consulting background. So when I started in the role, the first thing I did was I looked at the business unit scorecard, and I realized that email rate, open rates, and click rates are actually not on the scorecard for our head of marketing. And what's on there is revenue. So I wanted to make sure that everything we were doing was leading back to that ultimate business goal and driving that 10x revenue performance is the reason that we've been able to continue to make investments in the channel, and we have 150% CAGR over the last 3 years. So really making sure that we're driving relevant content that's moving the needle for the customers. So moving them on an adaptive journey, on a high consideration purchase, cross-selling them, upselling them, and reinforcing the value of their card product so that they spend more on it and swipe more frequently, and really making sure that all of the information is unique to that customer and interesting to them, and ultimately resulting in our key KPI, which is revenue growth.
And just again, to go back to the subject lines, the proxy for the health of your channel are the open rates, right? Regardless of the clicks or anything else, if they continue to open, there's something in there. So it's, obsolete, but also if you recast what that metric means, it's not always about clicks. It's about ultimately the revenue, and the channel health. So we use the open rates as an important way that, we started with a really decent open rate, and then we experimented with different ways of getting people to open it, but making sure that we had something solid in there when they did open it. And you have, as we all know, like 3 to 5 seconds, which is blisteringly cruel to us as marketers, but if there's something in there, they'll open it again.
And the other thing that we did that was super important in driving this strategy is that a lot of people will look at a campaign, as John was saying earlier, and they'll say, this campaign had a 40% open rate, this campaign had a 50% open rate, or whatever. But they don't actually know, was it the same customers that opened it both times or different customers? And so we spent a lot of time investing in pipes to make sure that we could actually report on this communication at an individual customer level so that we could say, who are the customers that opened, of the last 12 issues, how many opened 12, how many opened 11, how many opened 2, how many opened 0. And we've been able to really move the needle on the people who are we're opening sporadically or fewer times and really re-engage them with the program. And there's a direct correlation between the content strategy, the data strategy, the tech strategy, and all of the investments we've made and the engagement in the program, which is really exciting to see.
Have you experimented with animation, utilizing some of these real-time numbers to create even more energy and attention to the delivery of the latest real-time numbers?
Yeah, we've done some animated GIFs. There's so much content in our communication that we're always concerned about the load time and the wait. And I also had challenged Ergo when I first hired them. I was like, what about emojis in the subject line? And what about this? And what about that? And they're like, all right, let's make sure that the actual content is interesting and let's not worry so much about these gimmicks. Because truly customers will find what's relevant to them regardless of sort of the flash that's around it. But at the same time, I mean, we have a beautifully designed email, so that helps.
The thing that I would add to that is, we talk about the right message, right time to the right person. If you had to pick from the things, it's really the targeting and the messaging. The pretty pictures are great, but they don't get the job done. If you don't have the right person, you're not saying the right thing, nothing else matters. So that's, I think, really going back to what David was saying, is the heart and soul of it is, 95% of what you're doing is those two things.
We spend a lot of time moving from that calendar-based approach, which was really all about us. And I mean, there are so many marketers at American Express that have something to say. And so we could spend all day long just talking about the things that are interesting to us. But when we start talking to our customers and trying to understand what's going to help them grow their business and what matters to them the most, and really use that customer-first lens, which is tough to do. I've heard some companies have like an empty chair in their conference room that represents the customer so that they're always top of mind. And that sort of mindset and making sure that everything we're doing comes from that customer first filter has really helped us. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Great.